in a corner of the galaxy filled with shining cities and powerful empires, there lived a royal woman named Princess Alara. She was born in the Varelian Empire, a proud and advanced civilization known for science, strength, and beauty. Alara was the only daughter of Empress Turine, ruler of the Varelians. She was seen as perfect in every way. Alara was tall, graceful, and known for her deep violet eyes and silver blue skin. Her voice was soft but commanding. She had studied politics, space strategy, and culture since she was a child. By the time she turned 30 cycles old, she had already led missions, solved trade wars, and stood before the Galactic Council. Her people believed she would be the strongest ruler the Varelians ever had. There was only one problem. No one wanted to marry her. Across the galaxy, Alara had been introduced to leaders, scientists, warriors, and even royal heirs from other planets. Each meeting started with high hopes. The council always prepared carefully, selecting the most powerful candidates for alliance. But every time, the result was the same. The males refused, politely, firmly. Some said they were not ready. Some claimed their cultures were too different. Others said nothing at all. At first, Alara didn't care. She believed it was better to remain alone than to force a connection. She was proud. She believed that if someone didn't see her value, then they didn't deserve her. But as the years passed, pressure from her people increased. The empire wanted a future ruler. The nobles feared the end of the bloodline. Her mother grew quiet and distant. Alara began to feel something new. Doubt. Was she too strict? Too serious? Did she speak with too much logic and not enough feeling? Was she too cold? She never thought of herself that way, but the galaxy seemed to disagree. Her council began speaking of an ancient rule. If no royal match could be found among the high systems, then a candidate could be selected from the outer sectors, less advanced planets that were not part of the galactic circle. It was a forgotten law, used only in rare times. Alara disliked the idea. She saw it as desperation. But her advisors convinced her. There was one small planet in the Sol system that had recently caught the attention of scientists, a blue and green world called Earth. It had no known empire, no space fleet, and no contact with other civilizations. Still, the humans had survived many hardships. They had grown quickly, and most importantly, they were emotionally complex. The council believed that maybe what Alara needed wasn't another perfect leader. Maybe she needed someone different, someone real, someone from Earth. Without her full approval, a plan was made. A quiet ship was sent. A human male was selected, chosen randomly from a peaceful region. His name was Mason. He was not a soldier or scientist. He was a farmer living in the quiet lands of a country called the United States. He worked with machines and grew food. He had no titles, no medals, no special bloodline. Alara was shocked. This was the best they could find, but it was done. She would meet this Mason, speak to him, and offer him what no other male in the galaxy had accepted: her hand in courtship, if he refused like the others. Then she would return to face the fate the council had prepared, a forced union with a noble she did not love. Alara entered her ship and set a course for Earth. She did not bring a parade of ships or guards, just one small vessel. She wore a formal uniform, not a royal gown. She wanted this to be quick. The ship landed on Mason's farm one early morning. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky in orange and gold. The wind moved through the tall grass. Animals nearby watched silently. Mason was fixing one of his old machines when the ship touched down. He stood up, surprised but calm. He had never seen anything like it. The metal was smooth and glowing slightly from the heat of the descent. The door opened, and Alara stepped out. She walked slowly toward him, tall and proud, her eyes fixed on his face. Mason stared back, wiping his hands on a cloth. He didn't step back. He didn't look afraid. He looked curious. "You are Mason," she said in a clear voice. "Yeah," he replied, raising one eyebrow. "You're on my land." Alara paused. She had expected fear, or awe. Not this. "I am Princess Alara of the Varelian Empire. I have come with a proposal." Mason crossed his arms. Proposal? Like what? Selling something? She blinked. No, a royal proposal. One of union. I have chosen you. Mason stared at her for a long moment. Then, without warning, he laughed, a full, warm laugh. You're serious? He asked. You just land here and ask me to marry you? Alara did not smile. Yes, this is how it is done across the galaxy. Mason looked at the ship, then at her, then back at his field. Well, thanks, but no thanks. He turned and walked back to his machine. Alara stood frozen. No ceremony, no long speech, no fear. Just a no. She didn't return to her ship. She didn't leave. She watched him work, and for the first time in her life, she felt something strange interest. Not because he had power, not because he was famous, but because he was the first one who didn't try to impress her. He was real. He was simple. And he wasn't afraid of her title. Something in Alara's heart shifted that day. She didn't know it yet, but her journey had just begun. Princess Alara did not leave after Mason rejected her offer. She stayed near his land. Watching quietly from the edge of her ship, she wasn't angry. She wasn't insulted. She was confused. No male in the galaxy had ever looked her in the eye and said no without fear or hesitation. And now, this human farmer had done exactly that. With dusty hands, old boots, and simple words, he had shaken her pride more than any noble from the stars. The next morning, Alara stepped out again. The wind carried the smell of earth and leaves. Mason was out early, moving supplies near his barn. He noticed her coming and gave a short nod. You're still here, he said, not surprised. I have not been dismissed, Alara replied. I didn't know I had that power, Mason said. But suit yourself. She stood beside him as he lifted boxes. Her long silver cloak brushed the ground. He worked in silence for a while before glancing at her again. You ever lifted a crate before? No, she said. But I have studied hundreds of systems. That's not the same thing, Mason replied, without another word. He pointed at the smaller box near the truck. Try that one. Alara stepped forward. The box looked simple enough. She bent down, lifted with both hands, and stumbled. It was heavier than expected. Mason caught the edge before it dropped. You gotta use your legs, he said calmly. Alara tried again. This time she managed to carry it to the truck. When she set it down, she looked at him with a strange mix of pride and surprise. Not bad, he said. For a space princess. Alara didn't smile, but her voice was lighter when she spoke. I learned quickly. That day passed slowly. Mason continued his work, and Alara followed him. She asked questions. He gave short, honest answers. She didn't demand anything. She didn't mention royalty again. At noon, Mason sat under a large tree and opened his lunch box. He looked at Alara, standing nearby, and motioned for her to sit. She hesitated, but joined him. He handed her a sandwich. She studied it like it was a strange tool, then took a careful bite. This is good, she said. Surprised. Mason took a sip from his water bottle. It's just peanut butter and jelly. Alara looked up at the sky. It was wide and open, not like the dark ceilings of space stations or the metal cities of Varelia. It is peaceful here, she said. Most days, Mason agreed. They sat in silence for a while. Birds chirped nearby, leaves rustled above. For Alara, it was strange and calming. No guards, no pressure, just a man, a tree, and a quiet planet. Later that evening, Mason worked on his tractor while Alara sat on a wooden bench near the barn. She watched him with quiet focus. There was no elegance in what he did, but there was something she couldn't name, something strong. He fixed broken metal with steady hands. He wiped grease from his forehead. He didn't speak unless needed, and when he did, his voice was clear and grounded. Finally, she asked the question that had been in her mind since she landed. Why did you say no? Mason looked up from the engine. To what? To my proposal, she said. You didn't ask about my world or what the Union would offer you. You didn't even seem curious. Mason leaned against the tractor and wiped his hands with a cloth. Because I don't know you. And you don't know me? Alara tilted her head. Galactic unions often begin this way. Connections come after. The agreement, Mason shook his head. That's not how it works here. At least not for me. She studied his face. It was worn from years of sun. But honest, he wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't afraid of her power. He was simply being himself. In Varelia, matches are chosen for logic and advantage, she said. Love is rare. Emotion is seen as weakness. Well, Mason replied, on Earth, it's the opposite. At least where I live, if I'm going to share my life with someone, I want to know who they are, what they believe in, what makes them laugh, not just their title. Alara went quiet. No one had ever said such words to her, not even her own counsel. She had always been told to lead with her mind, not her heart. But now, this simple man was challenging everything. She had been taught as the sun lowered behind the hills, Alara stood up. May I stay for a few days? Mason looked at her for a long second. You're not bad company. As long as you don't try to rule my house, I will follow your customs, she said. He nodded once. All right then. That night, she returned to her ship but did not activate the engines. Instead, she looked at her reflection in the metal wall. For the first time, she wondered what it would be like to live a life where emotion was not a weakness. Mason, inside his small farmhouse, looked out the window toward the field where her ship rested. He didn't fully understand who she was or why she had come, but something about her presence felt different from the other things he had seen in life. Not because she was royal, but because she was trying, and that was something Mason respected. The next day would be another test, not of power, but of patience, understanding, and the slow building of something that neither of them could name yet. The next morning, sunlight spilled across Mason's field as usual. The sky was wide and cloudless. Birds moved from tree to tree, singing without care. But something had changed. Alara was already awake and standing near the barn when Mason stepped. Outside, she had tied her long hair back and was wearing simple earth clothes Mason had lent her. The jacket was a bit loose, and the boots were too wide, but she didn't complain. You're up early, Mason said as he sipped from his mug. Varelians require less sleep, Alara answered. And I want to be useful today. Mason raised an eyebrow. You don't have to help. You're a guest. I don't want to be just a guest, she said. I want to understand. Mason didn't argue. He just handed her a shovel and pointed to a patch of soil. The work began slowly. Alara struggled at first. The shovel felt heavy. Her hands, not used to rough tools, turned red and sore within an hour. But she didn't stop. She listened. She copied Mason's movements. When he showed her how to press her foot on the blade and use her weight, she nodded and adjusted. By noon, her forehead was covered in sweat and her sleeves were stained. But there was a fire in her eyes. You're tougher than you look, Mason said as they paused under a tree for water. I come from a world of control and calculation, Alara said, but none of that helped me with dirt and steel. Mason smiled. Out here, fancy words won't dig holes. Alara looked around. The fields, the trees, the open skies. Everything was real. Nothing was polished or designed by committees. It was not the galaxy she knew. You work every day like this, she asked. Most days, Mason said. It keeps me grounded. She looked at his hands, strong, scarred, and honest. No rings. No signs of wealth. Yet something about him felt richer than the royal heirs she had met in the past. In the evening, Mason cooked over a fire pit behind the house. The scent of grilled vegetables and warm bread filled the air. Alara sat nearby, watching the flames dance. She had never eaten food cooked like this before. On her planet, machines prepared every meal. This tastes better than anything I've had in the palace, she said after the first bite. Because it's made slow, Mason replied. Takes time. But it's worth it. Alara grew quiet. His words stayed in her mind. After dinner, they sat on the porch as night spread across the sky. Stars twinkled above them. Alara pointed at several bright ones. That one is part of the Solara belt, she said. We have a listening station there, And that faint red one is Neret's moon. Mason leaned back in his chair. Looks peaceful from here. Alara glanced at him. You don't seem impressed. I think space is impressive, Mason said. But I've seen beauty in small things. A morning breeze. A growing plant. A dog wagging its tail. Alara didn't respond right away. No one on her planet talked like this. They always spoke in numbers, reports, and rankings. But here, Mason was talking about feeling, about heart. The next day, they went into town. Mason needed supplies. Alara wore a hat and a scarf to blend in. Though her skin still caught the attention of a few curious children, she didn't speak much. She observed. She saw how Mason greeted others with a simple smile. No titles, no ranks, just friendly nods and firm handshakes. One old woman waved at him from across the street. That's Mason. Good man, she told a neighbor. Alara watched closely. He had no army, no medals, but he was respected because of how he lived, not who he was born to be. When they returned, Mason found her standing near the field alone. The wind blew gently through her hair. She turned as he approached. You live with honesty, she said. Not with control. I try, he replied. My world taught me that strength comes from silence, logic, and control, she said. But I'm beginning to think strength can also be different. Mason didn't speak. He waited. You said you want to know someone before choosing to share your life with them, she continued. That's something we never do in my culture. We match, then adapt. That sounds backwards to me, Mason said quietly. She nodded. It does to me now too. That night, Alara requested something strange. She asked Mason to show her something from his past, a memory, a piece of his story. He led her to a wooden chest in the house. Inside were old photos. His parents, a younger version of himself holding a puppy, a medal from a local farming contest, a letter from a friend who had moved far away. Alara held each item carefully. She had seen star maps and fleet reports, but never something like this. Pieces of life, pieces of heart. You carry your past with you, she said. Don't you? He asked. No, she replied. We store history in archives, not in drawers. That made Mason smile. Well, maybe you need a drawer or two. Alara laughed softly, a real laugh, not a practiced one. In that moment, Mason saw something shift. In her, she wasn't the same woman who stepped off that ship days ago. She was becoming something new, not less Varelian, but more human. And somewhere deep inside, Mason began to feel something growing, not just respect, not just curiosity, but something warmer, something harder to ignore. The princess who had been rejected by every male in the galaxy was no longer trying to impress anyone. She was learning, she was changing, and Mason was seeing her not as royalty, not as a visitor, but as someone real, someone different. 3 days passed since Princess Alara first stepped onto Earth. In those short days, something inside her had shifted. She still remembered her mission. She still remembered the expectations of her people. But now, those thoughts felt distant, like stars fading behind morning light. Alara began to wake up before Mason, often standing outside the house to watch the sunrise. She had never paid attention to something so simple before. The way the light touched the hills, the way the clouds moved slowly across the sky was all new to her, on her world. The skies were always covered by domes or filled with airships. There was never a quiet moment to look up. Mason noticed her more too, not just her words, but her actions. She worked hard, asked questions, and never complained. She didn't act like royalty anymore. She acted like someone who wanted to understand. Someone who wanted to belong. That morning, Mason was fixing a fence post when Alara approached him. She held a small wooden piece in her hand. It was carved into the shape of a bird. She had made it herself the night before using one of Mason's tools. I hope this is not too strange, she said, handing it to him. Mason looked at it and smiled. You made this? I tried, she replied. It's better than anything I've carved, Mason said, placing it gently in his pocket. Thanks. Before she could say more, a soft sound filled the air, a humming, low and steady. Alara froze. She knew that sound. A silver drone slowly floated down from the sky. It carried the royal seal of the Varelian Council. It landed near her ship, released a beam of light, and projected a message into the air. Alara stepped forward. Mason followed. The image of Counselor Varnon, one of Alara's oldest advisors, appeared in the light. His voice was calm but sharp. Princess Alara, this is your final notice. You were given one full cycle to secure a royal union. That time is ending. The Council demands your return within to-Earth rotations. If no formal engagement is declared, you will be expected to accept the arranged match upon arrival. The image faded. The drone powered down and flew away. Mason stayed quiet. He looked at Alara. Her face had changed. The peace in her eyes had vanished. She looked troubled. What does that mean? He asked. It means I have the days left, she said. If I don't return with a partner, they will force a union. I will have no choice. Mason looked down at the soil under his boots. And you don't want that, no, Alara said softly. I don't love him. I don't even know him. It will be for alliance only, political, cold. Mason took a deep breath. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? I didn't want to make you feel pressure, she said. You already gave me an answer. He didn't speak right away. They stood in silence. Later that evening, Alara sat outside alone. Her hands were folded in her lap. The wind was calm. Stars began to appear above her, but she didn't look up. Mason stepped out of the house and walked over. He sat beside her on the porch steps. Back then, he said, when you first asked me, I thought it was a joke. A stranger landing in my field, offering marriage. It felt unreal. I understand, Alara said. I came with too much pride. I didn't understand Earth or you. You've changed a lot, Mason said. You've worked harder than anyone I've ever seen. You learned to care about this place, about people, about simple things. She looked at him, eyes calm but serious. Do you think I've changed enough? Mason looked out over the field. Fireflies blinked near the fence. The air smelled of fresh grass, I think, he said slowly. You've shown me more truth than any person I've known in a long time. Alara turned to him, hope flickering in her chest. But, he added, I still don't know what a life with you would look like. You come from stars. I come from dirt. That's a long way between. She nodded. I'm not asking for a decision today. I just want you to understand what's at stake. I'm not afraid to return alone. But I don't want to go back empty-hearted. Mason reached into his pocket and pulled out the small wooden bird she had carved. You made this, he said, with your hands, not because someone told you to. That means something. She watched him closely. I need to think, Mason said, but not out of fear, out of respect. You've earned that. Alara nodded. I'll wait. That night, Mason sat at his kitchen table long after the lights were off. He thought about her, about the way she tried, the way she listened, the way she had changed. She could have stayed cold and proud, but she didn't. She became someone else, someone real. He looked out the window. Her ship stood quietly near the barn. A soft blue light pulsed at its base. The next day would be his. Choice. A choice that would not just affect to people, but to worlds. The morning was quiet. No wind, no birds. Even the animals near Mason's land seemed to sense something important was about to happen. Princess Alara stood near her ship, dressed in her formal suit from the Varelian Empire. Her silver blue skin glowed faintly in the early sunlight. Her hair was tied back, and her face was calm. But inside her heart was heavy. She had slept little during the night. Her mind kept going back to Mason's words. He needed time. He needed space to think. She had given it. But now time had run out. Today was the final day. If she did not return to her world with an accepted courtship, the Varelian Council would take full control of her future. They had already prepared the noble match. She knew the man, a powerful leader, strategic, cold. The match would protect the Empire's future, but it would cost her freedom. She looked toward Mason's house one last time. The door opened. Mason stepped outside, wearing his usual work clothes. His boots hit the ground with steady steps as he walked across the field. He didn't rush. His face was serious. Alara's heart beat faster. He stopped in front of her, standing tall but quiet. For a moment, he said nothing. She waited. Then he took a breath and spoke. "You asked me to understand what's at stake," he said. "I do now, and I've thought about it. All of it, the life you live, the future you face, the things you'd lose if you go back alone." Alara didn't move. She just listened. "I've lived a simple life," Mason continued, "but I've seen strength in you. Not the kind that comes from ships or titles. The kind that comes from trying to be better. Every day you worked beside me. Every time you failed, you kept going. You didn't act like royalty. You acted like a person." He paused. "I never expected to be a part of something bigger than this farm. But I also never expected someone like you to walk into my life." Mason looked into her eyes. They weren't just bright. They were full of fire, of hope, of quiet strength. "I don't know where this path leads," he said, "but I don't want to watch you walk away and wonder what could have been." Alara stepped forward. "Are you saying yes?" Mason reached out and took her hand. His hand was rough from work, hers smooth and cool, but the connection was strong. "I'm saying yes," he said, "not because of duty, not because of fear, but because I choose you." Alara felt warmth rush through her chest. She didn't speak. Instead, she squeezed his hand and held it tightly. Above them, a sound filled the sky, a Varelian command. Ships slowly descended from the clouds. The council had arrived to receive her answer. They had expected a report, a name, a sealed document. What they got was something else. Alara turned toward the ship as it landed near her own. A group of officials stepped out, dressed in dark robes and polished armor. At the front stood Counselor Varnon, the one who had warned her earlier. He looked at her, then at Mason, then back to her again. "Princess," he said, "we have arrived for your final declaration." Alara stood straight. "Then I declare it now." She turned toward Mason and held his hand higher. "This is the one I choose," she said. Mason of Earth, a man with no crown, but with a heart strong enough to change mine. The officials murmured among themselves. Varnon raised a hand to silence them. "This choice breaks tradition," he said. "Earth is not part of the core systems." "He has no rank, no council approval." "I am aware," Alara said, "but the law allows for freedom of royal selection. I am using that right. This is not a political move. This is personal." Varnon looked at her, then at Mason again. "And does he understand what this means?" "I do," Mason said. "I may not understand your rules or your cities, but I understand her." There was silence for a moment. The wind picked up gently. Varnon gave a slow nod. "Then the council will honor your words." He turned and stepped back into the ship. The others followed in seconds. The ship lifted into the air and disappeared into the clouds. Alara stood still, heart racing. Mason looked at her. "What happens now?" he asked. "We leave for Varelia," she said. Together, Mason looked at the house behind him. The trees, the barn, the fields he had walked every day for years. It would all stay behind. But he felt no fear. He had made his choice. They boarded the ship together. The doors closed with a soft sound. Lights filled the inside. Alara set a course for her home world. As the ship rose into the sky, Mason stood beside her. The earth grew smaller beneath them, but something larger was growing between them. Not a perfect bond, not a fairy tale, but something real. As stars filled the view ahead, Alara looked at Mason and said one final thing. "You were never just an option. You were the answer we never saw coming." And Mason, with a steady voice, replied, "Then let's show them why Earth is different." The stars stretched out like diamonds on black velvet as the royal ship moved quietly through space. Inside, Mason sat near a wide viewing window. His eyes scanned the endless sky. He had seen stars before, but never like this, never so close, never so clear. Beside him, Princess Alara stood in her royal uniform again, no longer in the simple work clothes she had worn on Earth. Her posture was straight, her presence strong, but her voice was soft when she spoke. "Are you all right?" Mason nodded slowly. "I'm still trying to believe this is real." "It is," she said. "This ship is taking us straight to Varelia. When we land, everything will change." He turned to her. "For you, or for me?" "For both," she answered. "But especially for you." The ship passed a massive moon, its craters glowing under distant sunlight. Mason leaned forward, looking in wonder. "I've never even been on a plane," he said. "Now I'm flying through space." Alara smiled. "You'll see more than most humans ever dream of. But you'll also face more pressure." He looked at her, puzzled. "Why?" "Because many still won't understand why I chose you," she said. "Some will think it's a weakness. Others will believe it's a joke. The Empire has strict ways. They believe in class, in power, in bloodlines. I don't belong," he said quietly. Alara walked closer and placed her hand on his shoulder. "You belong with me," she said. "That's what matters, and I won't let them treat you as less than that." Mason gave a small smile. "Good, because I didn't come all this way to stand in your shadow?" Alara smiled back. "Then stand beside me." The ship's voice interrupted them, approaching Varelian capital zone. "Prepare for landing." Mason stood up slowly and followed Alara to the front deck. The viewing panel expanded, revealing their destination. Varelia was a beautiful world. Twin suns glowed in the distance. Giant towers rose above the clouds. Floating bridges connected cities in the sky. Ships flew in every direction, like birds. In a silent dance, Mason couldn't believe what he was seeing. Everything felt like a dream. As the ship moved toward the landing platform, Alara looked serious again. "There's something you should know," she said. "What is it?" "There'll be a ceremony," she said. "It's required by law, a test of intention. You'll have to speak before the council." Mason raised an eyebrow. "Me? What would I even say?" "Speak the truth," she said. "They will listen. But you must be strong. You cannot let them see fear." Mason nodded slowly. "I'll do my best." The ship touched down with a soft hum. Guards stood in perfect rows as the doors opened. Alara stepped out first. Mason followed. The crowd outside was silent. Many watched with curious eyes. Some showed surprise. A few even frowned when they saw Mason. Alara ignored them. She walked with pride, Mason at her side. Together they entered the tall gates of the Imperial Hall, a place carved from crystal and silver. The walls sparkled under the sun. Inside, the floor reflected the sky above. At the far end sat the Varelian Council. 12 members in dark robes, each one older than Alara, each one with sharp eyes and cold stares. Counselor Varnon sat in the center. "Princess Alara," he said, "we expected your return, but not your guest." "He is not a guest," Alara said. "He is the one I chose." "Then he must speak for himself," said another voice. "Let the humans speak." Mason stepped forward. His heart was racing, but he didn't show it. He looked at each council member. Then he began to speak. "I don't come from a royal family," he said. "I'm not trained in politics. I've never flown a ship or studied your laws. I grew up on a small farm. I fix fences. I wake early. I work with my hands." Some counselors raised eyebrows. "But I know what respect looks like," Mason continued. "I know what hard work means. I know how to treat someone with kindness and honesty. And I know what it feels like to be seen, not for what you have, but for who you are." He turned and looked at Alara. "She could have chosen anyone," he said. "Powerful men, rich rulers. But she chose someone who listened, someone who treated her like a person, not a title." He looked back at the council. "If that makes me unworthy in your eyes, so be it. But I will stand beside her, no matter what, because love doesn't come from rank. It comes from truth." The hall was silent. Then Counselor Varnon stood. "You speak with boldness," he said, "and without fear. That is rare among humans." He walked forward slowly. "Your words are not polished," Varnon said, "but they are honest. And that matters." The others whispered quietly. Then they gave a slight nod one by one. Varnon turned back to Mason. "You are not what we expected." But perhaps that is what makes you valuable. He raised his hand. By the voice of this council, we recognize your bond. Let your union move forward. Alara smiled, her eyes shining with pride. Mason let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Outside, the twin suns glowed brighter. The people of Varelia watched as their princess walked through the streets, not with a general or a noble, but with a simple man from Earth. A man who had done what no other across the stars could do, had touched her hardened together. They were about to rewrite the future. The sky above Varelia was clear and golden as the suns rose over the city. The capital buzzed with life, from the floating towers to the busy lower streets. People whispered about the human who had stood before the council without fear. Mason had become more than just a visitor now. He was a symbol. Some called him brave. Others called him foolish. But no one could ignore him. Inside the royal palace, Princess Alara stood before a tall mirror. Her ceremonial dress shimmered with threads of silver and deep blue. Her crown rested lightly on her head, though it seemed she hardly noticed it. Her thoughts were elsewhere. Today was not just any day. Today was the joining ceremony. The Varelian Empire had many traditions, and when a member of the royal family bonded with someone, the entire planet took notice, especially when that someone came from a distant world. Mason stood outside the ceremonial chamber. He wore a special suit made for him by the palace tailors. It was simple compared to Varelian fashion, but elegant and clean. His hands were slightly shaking, but he breathed deeply to calm himself. "You look nervous," said a soft voice. He turned. Alara stood in the doorway, smiling at him. "You look like someone from a dream," Mason said without thinking. She smiled wider. "And you look like someone who's about to face 1,000 eyes and not run away." "I've already faced 12 counselors," he said. "How bad can a few thousand people be?" They both laughed gently. But then Alara stepped closer. "There's something I haven't told you yet," she said. "Something important." Mason listened carefully. "When we complete the ceremony," she said, "it won't just be a promise. Between us, the bond will link us in a way few understand, emotionally, mentally, even across space." Mason blinked. "You mean, I'll feel what you feel?" "In some ways, yes," she replied. "It's called the Varelian link. It's rare, powerful, and permanent." Mason looked down for a moment, then back at her. "Are you sure you want that with me?" She didn't hesitate. "I've never been more sure of anything." He smiled. "Then let's do it." The great doors opened. Music filled the air, played by crystal instruments held by floating orbs. The chamber was filled with hundreds of guests, nobles, leaders, scientists, even travelers from other planets had come to witness it. At the center of the hall stood the Unity Stone. It was tall, glowing gently with ancient energy. According to legend, the stone could sense truth. It was used only during the most sacred moments in Varelian history. Alara and Mason walked together to the stone. The crowd grew quiet. The High Elder stepped forward. "This is a union not born of power, but of courage," he said. "A joining between two minds, two hearts, two worlds." He looked at Mason. "Do you come to this place freely?" "I do," Mason replied. The elder turned to Alara. "And do you come with honor and trust?" "I do," she answered. "Then speak your vow," the elder said. Alara took Mason's hands. "I once thought strength meant being alone," she said. "But you showed me that true strength is standing with someone. I promise to walk with you through stars and storms, to share my name and my path." Mason took a breath and spoke clearly. "I came from a world where I never expected to matter beyond my home. But you saw me. I promise to protect your heart, honor your people, and never let go. No matter how far we travel." The Unity Stone pulsed with soft light. The crowd gasped that the stone had accepted their bond. A soft energy wrapped around them. It was not cold or heavy, but warm and light. Mason felt something shift inside. Not painful, not strange, just connected, as if he had opened a door in his soul and found Alara waiting there. The elder raised his voice. "The bond is formed. Let all witness it. A new path begins." The crowd clapped. Some cheered. Some watched with careful eyes, but none could deny what they had seen. Later, after the ceremony, Mason and Alara stood on a high balcony. The city stretched out below. Ships moved like birds across the glowing sky. "Did you feel that?" Mason asked. Alara nodded. "Yes, I felt your promise. I felt your heart." Mason looked thoughtful. "Does this mean we'll always know what the other is feeling?" "Not every thought," she said. "But we'll sense each other's strength, pain, joy. That connection will guide us." He smiled. "I like that." She leaned on the railing beside him. "You've changed everything, you know." Mason looked at her. "Me? I'm just a farm." "Boy, no," she said. "You're the reason people are talking about change. You're the reason some now believe that humans and Varelians can walk the same road." Mason chuckled. "I didn't plan any of this. Sometimes the best stories begin by accident." She said. The suns began to set. The city lights turned on slowly, one by one, like fireflies across a silver field. Alara turned to him. "There's more ahead. More worlds, more dangers. Not everyone will accept us." Mason nodded. "I know, but I'm ready." She smiled. "Then let's face it together." And so they stood, not as princess and stranger, but as partners, a human who never imagined, touching the stars and an alien royal, who discovered that love could change, and Pyrus. Their journey was just beginning, but their bond was already unbreakable.